our premise today is Roshi is going to talk about her newest book, A Little Bit of Zen. And hopefully all or some of us have had a chance to read it or at least flip through. And I don't want to sound like a salesman here, but if you haven't bought the book, there's time. With that, I'll turn over to Roshi and not take up her time and let her step into the conversation.
Thank you, Shoun. Thank you so much. So it's a kind of strange title. It's called A Little Bit of Zen. And the story is that the people who produce these little books do them for airports. So it's a kind of an airport book. You buy it and you're able to read it within whatever amount of time you're on the airplane. And so it's really a modest offering. And I have to say that Howard, who is on this webcast that we're doing, Howard Thorson was the editor, and he had the idea, yes, we can do this, and kind of worked with some of my talks that I'd given through the years. And so it's a fun book, I think. It has very much a social action kind of element. I think you're not going to read one of the chapters without something about how we are responsible for everything else. Because this is a ZPI, I just wanted to read part of it. I wanted to read about Bernie Glassman, who of course is the founder, our beloved Bernie, and he was my teacher. And I wrote a chapter about him in the book. And so I'm going to read part of that to you if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you.
So that this is chapter 5, and it's called Appreciating Bernie Glassman. And at the beginning, I'm moving from the previous chapter, which talked about the great fire in the Lotus Sutra. And this is, so I start off with the kinds of fires that are going on in California at the time and in Australia, the floods in Thailand. And what do these challenging issues of climate change and political upheaval and unprecedented immigration have to do with our Zen? Our Zen meditation. Is there a relationship between our meditation practice and our action in the world? Are these two practices in any way separate? One person who emphasized that there was no separation is my Zen teacher, Bernie Glassman. His sensitivities were to the suffering people of the world, and he was willing to serve them through a radical understanding of the Zen teachings that he had studied for many, many years. His Dharma name, the name his teacher, Maezumi Roshi, had given him when he ordained him as a Buddhist priest, was Tetsugen, which means to penetrate mysteries, to penetrate the unknown, a truly prescient name. He broke down barriers as a true Zen master must, including the barriers of our ideas about what Zen is, about what compassion is, and what serving is. It was a long road for Bernie, who lived for years as a traditional Zen monk, studying with Maezumi Roshi and supporting and managing the Zen Center of Los Angeles. After some time, Bernie returned to his birthplace in New York and founded the Zen Center of New York, first in Riverdale, which is an upscale neighborhood, and then in Yonkers. Soon he created the Grayston Bakery, which became a model for social entrepreneurships, offering work to homeless and previously incarcerated people. I remember the first time I met Bernie, sometime around 1987. He and others at the Zen Center, in addition to the bakery, had created something called the Grayston Family Inn. They were renovating a large apartment building that had been abandoned for years. The building was to include housing for homeless people whom they were hiring for the bakery, which served as the financial center of the whole system. The plan was to have a daycare center and counseling offices for the people who would live there. In those early days, I was still teaching interactive media at New York University. I had done a lot of video work, and so when Bernie asked for some help in documentation, I was happy to comply, never realizing how deeply and permanently I'd be affected by his spirituality. Of course, I looked forward to meeting this Zen monk who was said to be the foremost of the American Zen teachers, then still called by his Dharma name, Tetsugen. When I arrived at the construction site in Yonkers on Park Avenue, I met Bernie. This isn't Tetsugen, this was Bernie. He looked just like an ordinary guy. There was still some aura of a Zen style. He still shaved his head. He was wearing a yellow construction helmet, a very rumpled and dirty brown Samoe Zen work jacket, blue jeans, and construction boots. He immediately handed me a helmet and we began to climb all over the old abandoned building. I shot different angles and different people who were working while he talked, and we recorded his plans for renovation and future growth. At that time, he was a strong political force in Yonkers because not much was being done there for the homeless population. And he became a kind of rock star in what was then being called socially responsible entrepreneurship, making businesses and operations that would be socially responsible, hiring people who had prison records, taking chances with homeless people, and teaching them how to work in the bakery. It was very inspiring to so many. But I was new to Zen practice, and I still yearned for a more traditional style, something that emphasized meditation and retreats and chanting. I didn't realize at the time what a profound influence Bernie would have on my life, a blessed effect. Bernie and his wife at the time, Sandra Jishu Holmes, continued to expand the Grayston Mandala. They added a huge opportunity for housing people with HIV/AIDS. This was in the late 80s and early 90s, a place for people to live and die and have counseling services. All the while, they maintained the demanding business of the Grayston Bakery, which supported and held it all together. A couple of years later, I was then studying with Bernie's teacher, Maezumi Roshi, at Los Angeles. And I occasionally met Bernie when he visited. Now he had become a big, important person. He was in the news. NBC did reports about him, and his renown towered over his teacher, Maezumi Roshi. Besides Bernie, Maezumi Roshi appeared to be more or less an ordinary Zen master. I have a memory that's so strong, I want to share it with you. We were sitting in the Zendo in Los Angeles. Maezumi Roshi was preparing to give a talk, and Bernie was sitting right next to him. And as Maezumi Roshi began to speak, Bernie gently and so lovingly reached over and adjusted the okesa, the robe that Maezumi Roshi was wearing. It was just a simple, humble way of showing his love and care for his master. And in that action, he showed all of us in the room how to love, how to care for Maezumi. It was a small detail, but I was so struck by his caring for his teacher, his humility, actually. He was acting as an assistant, as a jisha at that moment. Oddly enough, Bernie was quite the stickler for form, the way things ought to be in the ritual tradition. And if Maezumi's okesa was slightly off, it had to be fixed. This guy who was breaking all the rules knew the rules very, very well. In 1995, Maezumi Roshi died suddenly, and poor Bernie, he was so busy with all his other social projects, and all of a sudden, as the first Dharma heir, he was given the task of taking over the White Plum Asanga, which was an organization of Maezumi Roshi's successors, and there were over 125 teachers at the time. It fell on Bernie, who was quite reluctant to maintain this organization. Maezumi Roshi's passing stranded his students who had not completed their training, and I was one of those. And Bernie opened his arms to me and said, "You can be my student. Come and practice with me." I had no idea what that might entail, because working with him, which was his way of teaching, meant learning a lot about social entrepreneurship and acting in the world of business, social work, and socially engaged leadership. It was an incredible gift he gave me. He broke down the walls of my idea of a cloistered Zen practice, but he did it through the teachings, not against them. I was always struck by the depth of his understanding. I had never met anyone who had such a deep insight. He didn't lecture us. He didn't tell us to do something about the suffering in the world. He was doing something about the suffering in the world. And his vision expanded and expanded. As many of you know, he began the Auschwitz retreats in 1996, held on the site of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. This was a Zen retreat that was open to people of all faiths, and that was groundbreaking at the time. It involved meditation and talks, but in this place where so much suffering had been inflicted by one group of humans upon another, there was, in fact, a lot of opposition at the beginning when he first talked about it. But we came. People came, and they began to understand what it really is to bear witness to the suffering, to bear witness to the sorrow, to the anger, to hatred, and to guilt. Victims of Nazi atrocities and children of perpetrators both attended these retreats. It was heartbreaking and challenging to see. Another new form was the street retreat, where a group of Zen students live on the streets for a few days or a week. On a street retreat, you first learn what it's like for homeless people. Homeless people are ordinary people, and you see how they are treated by others. You sit and eat and talk with someone who lives on the street, and you get a different view of the world you live in. It's a powerful work. Bernie called it going to the cracks, the dirty little places where things don't fit together as simply as they do in our comfortable lives. In the 1990s, street retreats were held in Los Angeles, the Bowery in New York, in homeless shelters, and in AIDS wards. Now they're being held all over the world. The street retreats and the Auschwitz retreats were based on an interpretation of Buddhist teaching Bernie called bearing witness. To bear witness is to verify that something exists and is true. A witness affirms that our stories are heard, held, and not forgotten. In the story of the Buddha, when he witnessed the suffering of sentient beings, he didn't run away. He was inspired to turn towards suffering, to understand it, and to seek a way to bring it to an end. Bearing witness to suffering awakens compassion and the aspiration to help. Bernie said, quote, "All humanity needs to see that part of themselves that they are trying to forget, which has led to the possibility of the Holocaust, of genocide. This is still going on. There's a part of us that will allow us to dehumanize people and then to kill people. It's in us, and it's part that we don't want to touch." He urged us to look inside ourselves, to bear witness to our own dynamic energies, and to realize that we can transform ourselves by bearing witness inside and out. In his commentary on the Buddhist precepts, Bernie wrote, doing Zazen is seeing the interconnectedness of all of life, of the entire one body. We see the extent to which our Zazen and everything we do affects everyone and everything else. Everything we do, even sleeping in our bedroom alone with the lights out, affects the whole universe. When we really see this, our whole life has to change. We see how much there is to do because our perspective, initially restricted to the self, is now unrestricted. He wrote that for us. I have 2 photos of Bernie in my interview room at the Zendo. In one picture, he's wearing a monk's robe, has a shaved head, shaved face, monk's jacket, and looks directly at the camera, intense, alive, ready. A classic picture of a Zen master. In the second photo, taken only a few years later, he has a beard, long hair, regular clothes, and a soft smile. He looks relaxed, alive, and thoroughly himself. These photos testify to the bearing witness that Bernie did to his own individual life, to his many years of dedicated formal Zen practice, and to his ability to let it go and bear witness to the change in himself and in the world he wanted to serve. In a way, I can say that these 2 Bernies gave me the whole of the Dharma. We look inside and outside. We bear witness to suffering, and we do not cast out an other, but instead directly recognize others in ourselves in others. It becomes a liberation. I'm going to skip a little bit so I don't bore you to tears, but I wanted to come back to this section. What about enlightenment? What about emptiness? What about finding your true self that Zen promises? We Zen teachers like to connect the innovations of the present with the ancient tradition, as Bernie did so well in his life. There is a beloved Zen poem called The Song of Enlightenment, said to have been written in the 8th century, that answers our question. Much of this poem is about not falling into the dream, the delusion of duality, that we are separate from everything, and not becoming lost in the idea of emptiness, of oneness, of some blissful, personal enlightenment. Here is one of the stanzas in the poem. We know that Shakya's sons and daughters are poor in body, but now not in the Tao. In their poverty, they always wear ragged clothing, but they have the jewel of no price treasured within. This jewel of no price can never be used up, though they spend it freely to help people they meet. Shakya's sons and daughters is, of course, a way of expressing those who follow the path of awakening, the path of the historical Shakyamuni Buddha. So essentially, that's us. That's Zen peacemakers. We are Shakya's sons and daughters if we find ourselves following the notions of the Four Noble Truths and the interdependence of all creations. Poor in body, but not in the Tao, that would refer to our simple, ordinary imperfections. Our simple bodies, some old, some young, some fat, some thin, some aches and pains, and still with all that poverty of body, we are filled with the way. And in our poverty, we always wear our ragged clothing. What is this ragged clothing? On one level, it is the patched robe monks of the followers of Shakyamuni, and those who are patched rakusus of Zen peacemakers. But I also like to think that we wear our ragged parts so that they can be seen. We wear our vulnerability so that we can encourage others. No matter how raggedy we may feel, we all have a precious jewel hidden in our imperfections. If we wait until we are perfect, we will never act. We need to realize that the jewel is always here. In a later part of this poem, the jewel is likened to the moon that shines on all the waters and is reflected in the vast ocean, the immense lakes, the tiny ponds, the drops of dew, the puddle of piss on our streets. The moon is reflected in each of us, and this is the jewel of no price, treasured within. What is significant about the jewel is that it says the jewel of no price can never be used up, though they spend it freely to help people they meet. We cannot exhaust it. Actually, the more we share, the more we serve. The brighter and clearer the jewel manifests. When we help each other, we help ourselves. When we express compassion and love, we open our hearts and receive it back. Farther along, it says, the lotus lives in the midst of the fire. It is never destroyed. This image of the lotus that emerges from the mud, the putrefying ponds, and is enlivened by periodic forest fires is an image of the leisurely one, the Bernies, who also manifest activity in the world. The lotus, beautiful, extraordinary flower blooming in a homeless shelter, in an immigrant boat, a solitary confinement cell, a broken heart. This is not some exalted, abstract idea of emptiness, of the absolute. It is enlightenment in everyday life. In these images, this wonderful song of enlightenment or verification of the way encourages us to allow our raggedy selves to be suffused with the wisdom of the way and to act and serve in the world, balanced by the leisurely one. This aspect of what steadies us. Can't you see Bernie in that? What is that leisurely one? Who is that leisurely one? Isn't it you, yourself, when you are in touch with your true nature? Isn't it this one aspect of what people call enlightenment? What can get solidified around a conceptual phrase called emptiness or the absolute? But isn't the leisurely one more on point? Is it that part of us that responds spontaneously, freely, with an open heart? It is that part of us that is willing to take care of everything we encounter, that recognizes both our interdependence and our uniqueness. And the name leisurely one implies the flow of life, the freely flowing reality that encompasses all creations, and also just this little one, this gesture that makes a difference. The practice of Zazen teaches us over and over again that there is no other, no defining characteristic, no color or skin or gender preference or sexual preference, no religion or culture that makes an other. It's all in our minds. And it is our minds that can change our actions and can change the world. I invite you to bear witness and in your mind ask, what will I do? Says Bernie in a film about this work. You have many options. Choose one. In many ways, it may be frightening, but it's an exciting time to be alive. In this world we live in, with so much suffering from poverty, intolerance, hatred, there's so much we can do if we just take up Bernie's challenge. Choose one. Let us scrutinize what we call justice, what we call rehabilitation, what we call welfare. Let us not lose sight of the vastness, the interconnected quality of life. It was the teaching that Bernie gave us all, how to activate the profundity of the tradition. Thank you, Bernie, for waking us up to what has always been our true nature. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Roshi. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. And for everyone attending here, I can assure you the rest of the book is as accessible and wonderful as that chapter. Holly's original idea for this session was that it would be a conversation, but we have 46 guests.
Oh.
So I think it would be selfish for me to dominate the conversation, but I will invoke privilege and ask the first question, but then I want to open it up to anybody who's got a comment or a question. And I want to start with the question that is from your 10th and final chapter. Your final chapter is Bodhisattvas Have More Fun. And what I wanted to ask you, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but this is kind of a softball, I guess, maybe for you, isn't this very, very, very serious business? This life and death are of supreme importance. How can we be having fun when it's that serious?
Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yes, you are.
You know, that's that again, I go back to Bernie. Bernie taught me so much about that. He was always had a sense of humor and could see the other side of what was going on. And when we're involved in the work, you know, we're in a prison, or we're on the streets or at the bedside of someone who is suffering, there is within that an incredible joy. It is in that connection, in that meeting of self and other, where that kind of me separate from you dissolves. And yet it's there, of course, because that's the structural supporting one another. At the same time, there is that interaction that is just a complete joy.
Thank you. Wonderful. And Holly just sent a chat. Thank you, Holly. If you'd like to ask a question, we've got two screens, so we can't see your actual hand. So use the electronic hand, if you would, to raise your hand, and try to have your question be lean. We do have a lot of us, and I expect there may be quite a few questions. So
thank you, Holly. Okay. Why don't you throw me another question, Geoff?
Oh, we have, well, I've got 6, so. But,
okay.
Anne, you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And then maybe we'll go to Seiko after Anne.
Hello, Roshi. Thank you for this beautiful book. This is more of a comment that I think that the gift that Roshi Glassman gave you, for me, what you've done is share it. You've enabled me to engage in Zen practice for many, many, many years and continue my practice when I moved away. And to me, I think that's the most beautiful part of Zen practice, is to enable other people to engage in it, to show them the many ways that engaged practice not only benefits self and other, because there's no difference between self and other. So thank you. I am always, always grateful for you each day.
Thank you, Gato. Yeah, it can't be emphasized enough that Bernie broke through a wall of Zen practice before Bernie, BB, was, you know, most of us practice in a very kind of strict, formal ways, both liturgically, but also in terms of our study and our understanding. And he was the one that really made it real for so many of us. And it was perfect because the times demanded that of us. And he was there, he was alive, and recognized that there could be something done with the power of the Zen tradition that could then be channeled into, choose one, into finding some activity. You know, you can see in the Dharma centers around the country that are related to us in particular, you've got all kinds of prison workshops and homeless workshops, and nearly all of us are engaged in racial training now. I think that we have to say that to Bernie. Thank you. It was his great teaching. And the thing is about him, I just want to say one other thing, maybe I didn't get to. Bernie knew the traditional ways. He was the person he was the go-to person in this country for all of the theoretical and ritual aspects. He knew that. And so that was the perfect person to shift and make a shift and say, we're not looking at what's in front of us. It was beautiful. Great gift. Thank you, Gato.
Thank you, Gato and Roshi. Seiko from Brazil, you had your hand up a little bit earlier, your physical hand, I saw.
Thank you, Roshi, for your teaching.
Thank you, Seiko.
So, I have one question about how important is the practice of not knowing and zazen to could go to bear witness.
What was the last word?
Bearing witness.
Bearing witness. I see.
First,
Go on.
yes.
Okay. Well, you know, not knowing is that openness to every possibility. If you're completely open, then you can see, this plant needs water. This plant needs no more water. You can see that because you don't have some idea that all plants need water. You have let go of your preconceived idea. And prajna is before knowing. Wisdom is what is before concretizing something. And when you're completely open, then you bear witness and you say, oh, this person in this homeless shelter, what they really need is a food card. They don't need a pillow. I brought a pillow? Too bad. That's not what they need right now. They need a food card. It's like just being completely open. So that not knowing can be on a very ordinary plane. And of course, you can go and say it's also an apophatic statement. It's a statement that it can't be known. It can't be said. It's too big. It doesn't fit into vocabulary. So that's another level of it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Seiko, for your question. Nice to meet you in Brazil.
Nice you.
If we could travel, but no.
Thank you, Seiko. And is it Ray? Ray, you have your hand up, and please go ahead and unmute yourself. And
hello.
Hi.
I'm Ray. I'm in Camden, Maine. I guess the thing that comes up for me around, like you said, all humanity needs to see that part of themselves that they'd rather forget. And for me, like one of the like harder things kind of about honoring the vows and like looking at the lineage and Roshi Glassman's work, and like most people don't want to get in the boat. Like they still don't want to see, like things are like, you see even now, like people don't want to wear a mask. So like, what is like sometimes I ask myself, well, what would Roshi Bernie do? Do you know what I mean? Like, and at a certain point, do you just, I don't know, do you just like, be like, well, I guess we kind of are a malignancy on the planet. Huzzah, you know, like I guess the planet will be happy to be in remission, or do we like keep trying to get people in the boat? That's my question.
It's a beautiful question, Ray. And I have to say that I'm very triggered by those who do not wear masks in my city, in my crowded city. And so I have to invoke Bernie every day. Please help me, Bernie, not be reactive here and make some mean remark to the person passing me by, coughing in my face, in my mask. But I have my mask, of course. So what I mean, are we going to solve all everyone's problems and everyone's? I mean, one thing is to really look at the suffering that is part of the human condition. And when we say we are all intertwined and part of everything else, we're also saying we're all part of this suffering mass of the quality of, you know, these animals that are humans, human animals who have our greed, anger, and ignorance that we're born with. And not everyone has had the benefits that we've had to be able to look more carefully at our reactivity. So for me, it's like, well, you know, we're all on this raft of service to serve others. And, you know, sometimes most of the time we can find people that can benefit from our service, but not always. And then the trick for us is the ones that we can't, that generate this kind of reactivity in us. They are like our teachers. They're like teaching us. They're like helping us to see where we are falling out, where we can't go yet in terms of compassion, and where we can't yet find a skillful way to, as Seiko said, to bear witness, to bear witness to their suffering. So that's how, anyway, that's a struggle for me. And I think it's a struggle for most people. And so that, how to be a Zen peacemaker at such a time, you know. So over and over again, to remember to not know, and that allows us to bear witness. That allows us to do that. And to not get caught in those automatic judgments that are so easy for us, that we've been trained to do by our society. I hope that's helpful, Ray.
Thank you, Roshi. And Ray, thank you so much for your question. Yuri, you have your hand up. If you'd like to unmute, tell us where you're joining us from too.
Hi everyone, I'm Yuri. I'm talking from Brazil too, from Belo Horizonte. And let me say, you said something about choose one, and sometimes you said something about choosing one, choosing something to do, right? And sometimes we choose one, but it seems like too big, too hard to be doing that. And I don't know, I feel like I'm overwhelmed, that I cannot change what I'm trying to change or help what I'm trying to do. I don't know how to persist and not like just giving up. Just, I don't know, just like Bernie did for so long. Because sometimes it seems like we were going backwards. So yeah, just some advice or something. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Bernie did change. I worked with Bernie for many years as we worked on Zen Peacemakers and the international and the order, and we would have meetings upon meetings upon meetings, and things would not work out exactly the way we planned them. And then we'd have to come back and start in another direction. And we're also being aware of what problems are arising and how they need to be taken care of. So it's not, you know, very often we say, I want to do this, but then it turns out that maybe we want to work in the prisons, but it turns out the families of the prisoners are also in need, and we're able to do something there more expeditiously, more easily, more quickly, more efficiently than we originally thought. So we thought we were going to prison, but then it turns out we're in the ghetto, we're in the homes, in the slums in New York instead. And that's just moving with the moment. And to go back to the tenets that Seiko brought up, you know, it's just like we can have an objective, but we always have to hold within that objective the not knowing. We don't know if this is going to work. What will this objective teach us? And it might teach us that the way we're going about this problem is not skillful and we need to change. But how do we know that? By bearing witness, by really seeing what is happening here. Sometimes the bearing witness is to ourselves, to our own frustrations. I mean, the bearing witness can be to those we're interacting with, but very often it's bearing witness to our plan. So I encourage you to continue to not know, to bear witness, and to heal.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work, Yuri.
Thank you, Roshi. And my dear friend and almost neighbor, Peter Tetsuji, has a question. Tetsuji, if you are unmuted, please go ahead.
Roshi, it's so wonderful to see you. And,
Oh, it's lovely to see you, Tetsuji. I miss you.
I understand and feel it's extraordinary the work of Zen peacemakers and Bernie's work with AIDS, with the homeless, with prisons. But in my life, I've seen so much suffering on Wall Street, in policemen, in people who don't wear masks. How do we move to help these, the vast majority of people who are suffering and and the violence or reactions that are because of their suffering? How, as practitioners, can we serve them?
So a beautiful question, Tetsuji. And, I invoke Bernie, first of all. When he says choose one, what he means is, we can't, it's typically not possible for us to deal with all of these problems. So we can choose one. We want to work with the police. Then we want to work with our perhaps began with our local police department, or depending on our skill set, if we have certain psychotherapeutic skills, or we have certain business skills, that we can then go to that particular point of suffering and work deeply. If we don't choose one, if we just kind of like, as I've been doing this past 6 months, just reading about things and saying, oh God, oh God. So I'm not helping anything when I'm in that state of mind. I have to find something that will make a difference. Now, of course, I am very socially active. On the other hand, I'm no Bernie. I have a community. And in my way, that's my primary service, is to teach these things and hope that people will contribute to the greater good by being aware of the possibilities of their spiritualities. So it depends on what's in front of you. What can you do? And I think you, since you're very aware of the business sector, that's a natural for you. Not for me, they wouldn't listen to me, but you, they'll listen to.
Thank you, Roshi. And I can assure you, when Tetsuji speaks, I listen to him too. So thanks, Tetsuji, for the question. We have about 15 minutes, so please don't be shy. If you've got a question or a comment for Roshi, raise your electronic hand. Roshi Barbara, hi.
Hi, Geoff. And hi,
Oh,
Roshi. So good to see you.
So good to see you.
And thank you so much. I'm so much looking forward to your new book. I ordered it, but didn't receive it until now in Switzerland. So I hope very much I will get it. Yeah, I had the chance to join Bernie a lot in Europe.
Yes.
When he was giving workshops, and I was with him when he had all these interactions with the audience. And so often I heard him say that we have just to do also the small steps and not have only this idea that we have to do like a Grayston, because it feels too big, of course, for most of us. And he also told it to me always to be patient and to think in kalpas. He always said, yes, you just have to do the first steps and then to bear witness what happens. And if it works, to go on. If it does not work, to look around, to do again a deep bearing witness, and maybe to change the way. And he was for me really a wonderful example in doing that, because I also saw him sometimes that he also had this impatience in himself, but he just sat really and gave himself also the time to choose another way. And I'm so grateful for that example. And what I also saw was that he saw in the people their energy, and he could support them so much in their own ways to go, which is so beautiful, I think. So he gave me a lot of trust in myself also, to start with small things. And I learned that they become sometimes bigger by themselves, and other people also want to join them. So many things that we did, suddenly the Sangha supported it, and more people joined. So I also got the feeling that I didn't have to do it all at myself, because people love to join if we learn to ask. So this was a big teaching from Bernie.
Yes.
I'm grateful.
So beautiful. Your help, you sharing that with us. So important. Exactly what you said. To start small, to be willing to move, to change, to shift. I too saw that throughout the creation of his different modalities that he worked in, and to rely on others, to rely on Sangha. So important. And look what has developed, what has flowered, and a lot under your tutelage, Barbara. Wonderful work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Roshi. We still have some time here. We have about 10 minutes. If you have a question.
So while you're thinking about it, I'll tell you one thing. I was, for some reason, I'm thinking about when I first began studying with Bernie. You know, I was used to a kind of traditional. You go in to interview, you do a prostration, you sit down, and you say your koan, and the teacher, your question, and teacher responds. I've been doing that for like a long time, many years. And then when I began to work with Bernie, the way it would be I'd go up to Grayston from New York. I'd go up there on the train, and I'd go in. He'd say, "Okay, I need to get the car fixed." And we get in the car, and I would drive him to the garage. And on the way, he'd say, "Well, okay, what's your koan?" And I would give it, and we would have this back and forth, you know, or else we'd be like walking down the street, and we'd be having a coffee. And it was always in this wonderfully informal way. And it really made the teachings alive to me, and took it away from the more traditional ways that I had worked in previously. And that's had a big impact on me, is that recognition that no matter what we're doing, we're working on the practice.
Thank you for that. Anyone here if you wave your hand, I may not see you because I've got 2 pages. So use the electronic hand if you can. And I'll step in with a question if not. Roshi, one of the things that I noticed, when you first encounter the book, I think what you expect is sort of a how to do Zen book. And what I found so wonderful is that it's not that. It's not in a straight line. It's, okay, here's how you sit. Here's how you put your hands, body, breath, mind, and then next step, and then next step. It's not that way. It's not linear that way at all. So it's just wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. In fact, it's chapter 6 before you actually get to Zazen instruction. But I want to ask you, and again, this is perhaps a little bit leading, but you relate the parable of the burning house, and I want to just ask you, for the benefit of everyone here, how do we get small enough to get through that little tiny door?
Right.
To get out of that damn house.
Yes. So, the story is that there are 3 children inside a burning house, and the father wants to get them out of the house, and he promises them some magnificent carts, and because otherwise they wouldn't pay any attention. They were playing inside the burning house. I always imagine it as kind of the world of media and the world of gaming going on inside the house, and they're unable to listen to the father saying, "Hey, this is your life. There is suffering. Come out, come and serve." And what's so delightful about the story in the Lotus Sutra is that to get out, they have to go through this narrow door, which is what Geoff is pointing at. And I always like that. I mean, it's just one line, but it's so perfect because it's not easy. Sometimes when we want to encourage people to practice, we make it sound really easy. It ain't easy. To get out of that hell realm in our minds, that compulsivity, that grasping, those poisons, greed, anger, and ignorance, it takes some discipline, which goes back to Shoun's other point about teaching Zazen. It takes some personal discipline, and that's the narrow door. We have to get through that door. We have to recognize that it's not all about me. It's only all about me in that I am part of everyone else. So that's that narrow door that's so important. Then you get outside, and it depends on what kind of chariots you want. Parts will be available to you. It may be, taking care of someone who's very ill. And certainly we all, during the AIDS epidemic, learned about that. And now in the pandemic, we see it around us all the time. And that is why so many of us are so threatened by the issue of mask wearing that was brought up. It's because we feel like everybody should wear. Doesn't everybody want to take care of everybody? And we realize those people who can't get through the narrow door, they can't see that they're part of everything else and that they affect everything else. It's a very helpless place to be. It's very sad. And that's one of our jobs. And those of us who do traditional Zen centers, that's one of our jobs, is to teach that, to help people to see their interconnection. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
You're welcome. Thanks for that answer. Very nice. We have a few more minutes. I know someone has a question you're eager to ask.
Burning to ask or to say. Something to say. Okay. Lovely to see all these faces. A lot of you I don't know, but you look beautiful. It'd be lovely to know.
Yes.
Maybe next time we have a face-to-face peacemaker meeting.
Indeed, indeed. Well, again, I didn't want to dominate here, but I came prepared. So,
well, that's your job.
I know, Roshi. Roshi Eve Marco, 3 weeks ago, right after the election, made the observation that, and we're not all in the United States, so forgive me for those that are outside of the US, but I know so many people are watching what's happening here, that now we know, and I want to be real careful about characterizing this. Now we know who we are after we voted. We know intimately, and wherever you line up on any issues or whatever support you might give one person or another, we really know that there's this big difference. And she really characterized it as being, the koan for our times, to find a way to heal. The other day, by contrast, Rebecca Solnit, who I'm sure you read, opined that ain't my job, basically. She did it very eloquently, but basically, it was saying, what kind of arrogance is it that makes me think that I need to go change someone's mind? I don't know if there's anything there you want to comment on, but I've been really wrestling with this too. Okay, I need to make amends, and I need to heal with people in my family. And now I'm wondering, do I? Or do they? Or do we? Or what? What is it?
Well, it seems to me that we're not separate. I mean, it's not like we're like these perfect, and also, if you're not in this country, you must, for most of you who are not in this country, you must be so relieved that this country is not going to go into an incredible, even more nationalism and kind of a servant to the three poisons of greed and anger and ignorance. And so the ignorance is not knowing that we are not separate. And I think that's our job, is to heal. I don't agree with, I know Rebecca Solnit is a brilliant writer and thinker. And, but I think, yes, absolutely, that is the job in front of us. Now, how we go about that, depending on our own skill set, it's just like the question that Yuri asked. How do we know? Well, we have to find where our niche is. Where is it that we can make some kind of difference? And sometimes it's a conversation. Sometimes it's a project. Perhaps start a project that can make a difference. Perhaps it begins with not knowing and actually listening to the suffering that has caused this separation. A lot of the suffering has to do with poverty, and poverty of mind, and of a blaming culture. So to look at the whole piece and find choose one. Where can I make a little difference? And if you've got a family situation, that's a great place to start.